Depression sucks, and mood swings suck, and emotional dysregulation sucks. But you know what makes all of that suck so much more? Having alexithymia and not being able to identify your depression or your mood swings. Alexithymia is when you don't always know what it is that you're feeling. You just know you're feeling something. And I made a whole video explaining alexithymia that you can check out here, but this video is going to be about how when alexithymia combines with mood swings, emotional dysregulation, or a mood disorder like depression or bipolar, how it can be such a uniquely horrible experience. Because how the hell are you supposed to regulate your emotions when you don't even know what they are? I've been dealing with this super fun combination my entire life. And yes, it is really, really hard, but I just want you to know that it's not hopeless. In this video, I'm going to explain what this can feel like, how to know if this is what's going on for you, and then we're going to talk about what to do about it. If you're new around here, hello, my name is Megan. I am autistic, ADHD, and a couple other neurodivergencies thrown in there, and I love making videos about mental health and neurodivergence. So the first thing you might be wondering is like, okay, I know what depression is, I kind of know what mood disorders are, but like, what is that other thing you mentioned, the emotional dysregulation? What is that? So in order to explain emotional dysregulation, first allow me to explain emotional regulation. What does that look like? Being emotionally regulated doesn't mean you're like happy all the time or neutral all the time. It means that your emotions exist inside a kind of window, a window where you can feel positive things and negative things and everything in between while still feeling in control, still feeling like yourself, still feeling relatively safe and comfortable. Emotional dysregulation then is when we experience things outside of this window. Now, to be fair, everyone is going to experience emotional dysregulation at some times in their life. There are times when it's very appropriate. For instance, when you're grieving, you're going to have a lot of lows, and that's going to suck and it's going to hurt, but it's supposed to, because you love them. And when you get a promotion or have a baby or meet a new friend, you're going to experience these exuberant highs that, you know, are also very appropriate and good. So everyone experiences emotions outside of that little window sometimes. But if you deal with emotional dysregulation on a regular or chronic basis, what that often looks like is swinging wildly back and forth between the two, spending a ton of time in one or the other, and having a hard time returning to that window. A lot of people who experience emotional dysregulation feel very out of control, myself included. Now, you might be thinking what I just described sounds a lot like bipolar disorder, and it absolutely can. Bipolar is probably the most famous condition that is associated with emotional dysregulation. However, that's not really how bipolar works. Our culture has sort of painted this picture of bipolar that looks like very intense, very rapid mood swings on a regular basis. And for some people, that is how their bipolar presents. But for a lot of people, they don't actually have very many mood swings. They just have very significant mood episodes several times a year. For me, my emotional dysregulation is closely tied to my autism, my ADHD, and my trauma. And I also want to say that if you've been depressed for a long time, you can also experience emotional dysregulation as you start to come out of that depression. It's almost like you've felt so low for so long that as you start to come back up to that window of tolerance where your emotions actually feel tolerable, it's like you start doing these big spikes and swings on your way up. At least I know that's how it was for me and how it's been for me most of the times I come out of significant depressive episodes. Regardless of why you're experiencing mood swings or emotional dysregulation, they can be really hard. And it can be especially hard when you're experiencing alexithymia as well and you can't pinpoint what it is you're feeling. So you might be watching this and be like, Megan, I don't know if that's me or not. How do I know? Well, what I'm thinking is I can describe what emotional dysregulation and mood swings feel like for me when I'm experiencing alexithymia and when I'm not, and you can kind of see if any of that applies to you. So let's start with depression. I think a lot of people are really familiar with depression, and a lot of us have major depressive disorders. So when I'm feeling depressed, it can feel a lot of different ways for me. It really depends. I guess I have lots of flavors of depression. So the one that you're probably really familiar with is kind of the apathy, hopelessness, gray kind of depression, where it's just everything sucks. There will be no end to the suck, and I am probably the cause of the suck, and I hate myself and everything around me feels dumb. In my body, depression makes me feel really heavy, like there's a huge boulder on my chest all the time. And my head feels really tense and tight, but also foggy at the same time. And my limbs, my arms, my legs, they just feel disconnected from me, like I'm being puppeteered anytime I move. It's against my will. Someone's making me do the things I have to do. I'm just being like marionetted on the way to the kitchen to make some food, or on the way to bed to get some sleep, I guess. Like, everything feels really pointless, and like something else is controlling me and making me do the things I know I should be doing. Now, I am very fortunate in that I don't experience that type of depression very often anymore, thanks to medication, therapy, and probably just luck of the draw. However, I have another form of depression that I experience much more frequently and is really debilitating for me. And it's what I call orange depression, angry depression, aggressive depression. This is basically a really energetic depression, and it's when I feel a lot of self-loathing. It's honestly probably very closely tied to my trauma, and it really brings up a lot of shame, a really negative and loud inner monologue, and I feel like everything in the world is my fault and I am God's mistake. P.S. if that's a little heavy, I apologize, but seriously, like, that's what it feels like. In my body, this type of depression feels antsy, very energetic, very, very desperate to find something, anything that feels right, that feels comforting, that doesn't feel so freaking horrible. And I want to do something. I want to be impulsive. I want to like just do anything. And so I actually have started a list of safe impulsive activities I can do when I'm feeling like this, like dye my hair a crazy color, for example. So those are the two main forms of depression that I experience, and that is kind of how I understand them when I'm not dealing with alexithymia. When I am dealing with alexithymia, here's how they feel a little different. What are you doing? Oh, me? I'm working on a resource roundup for one of my one-on-one clients. What is a resource roundup? It's a really cool collection of Instagram accounts, academic articles, online tests they can take, podcast episode, YouTube channels, and so many more resources that pertain specifically to what we've talked about in our sessions. That actually sounds really helpful. What do you put in a resource roundup? Well, for this particular client, we are primarily focusing on shame and stories we tell ourselves about who we are and how we can tell stories that are more helpful, more honest, and more compassionate to ourselves. That's kind of awesome. Yeah, but I mean, for some of my clients, we focus a lot more on productivity. For other clients, we focus on emotional dysregulation. And for other clients, we focus on interpersonal relationships. It's super, super customizable when you work with me one-on-one. So what should people do if they're watching right now and they want their own resource roundup? They want to work with you. Oh, they can just go to the description and book a discovery call with me. I love meeting with people before I decide to work with them, just to make sure we're a good fit. Oh yeah, get back to work and we'll get back to the video. Oh yeah, thanks, okay. So with the first kind of depression, the like heavy, hopeless depression, at first, I just think I'm getting physically sick. I'll just be like, why do I feel off? Everything feels wrong. I feel heavy and bad. Why do I feel bad? I guess I'm getting sick. I better take some vitamin C. Usually it takes a couple of days for me to finally catch on and be like, wait a minute. I feel heavy. Nothing makes me happy. This is depression. Or sometimes I don't catch on at all and my husband will just be like, oh, well, you're depressed. And he'll say it super matter of fact. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And he's like, Megan, you haven't smiled in days. Like, you're not doing great. And I'm just like, what? This is like a revelation to me. And every time I'm so surprised. Now, I'll be honest, with the second type of depression, the more aggressive depression, I usually kind of know what's going on because I have developed enough self-compassion that I don't think I deserve to be spoken to the way I speak to myself when I'm in that headspace. So when my inner monologue takes that turn towards really aggressive, really mean, name-calling, like bad stuff going on inside my head, I do start to notice pretty quickly, and the alexithymia can shroud why I'm feeling that way, but it doesn't shroud the feelings themselves. Okay, so that's depression. Now let's talk about emotional dysregulation and how that can feel different based on whether or not I'm experiencing alexithymia. So when I'm not experiencing alexithymia, when I'm able to identify my emotions, my mood swings, my emotional dysregulation is a lot less scary because I can look at it pretty objectively and say, okay, you felt really depressed for like an hour and now you feel better. And then like an hour later, let's say I start feeling really like giddy and excited. I can kind of zoom out a little and say, okay, we're going up and down a little bit. And that's all right. That's just part of it. We're gonna be fine. Whereas when I'm experiencing alexithymia, basically what that does to me is it zooms me in so far that I can't see anything outside of what I'm currently experiencing. So I may be depressed for like an hour and then feel fine and then feel giddy. So to me, I'm gonna feel like I'm slowly losing my mind or quickly losing my mind, depending on how fast the emotional dysregulation is going. Alexithymia has made me very, very scared of my emotional dysregulation in the past. I mean, so much so that there was even a time where I thought I might be possessed. That's how much I didn't understand what I was going through. But thankfully, there are ways to start to identify alexithymia. That way you can say, okay, I'm not possessed, I'm not losing my mind, I just don't know what it is I'm feeling. And yes, that can be scary, but I know I'm okay. So, how do I cope with my depression and my mood swings when I'm experiencing alexithymia? First, I treat the fever even if I don't know what's causing it. This basically means even if you don't know why you're depressed or why you're experiencing mood swings, you can still attend to and care for the version of yourself that is depressed, the version of yourself that is going through some emotional dysregulation. Now, I used to be really against this kind of message because I was like, no, if you have a fever because of a virus, that's totally different than if you have a fever because of bacteria. You need to know what's causing it so you can treat it properly. And yes, that is true. Sorry, in a less metaphorical sense, basically, like, I thought it was really important to know what was causing my depression and my emotional dysregulation. And I still think there's a lot of truth to that. But I also recognize that you can do triage care, right? Where it's like, okay, yes, we need to know what's causing it, but also we need to bring your fever down so that your brain cells don't die. Again, in a less metaphorical sense, it's really important to know what's causing your depression or your emotional dysregulation, but at the same time, it's okay to just do some self-care, use some coping mechanisms, and take care of yourself in the moment as well. The second thing that I like to do when I'm experiencing alexithymia with depression or emotional dysregulation is I like to track what I can. I like to track my mood throughout the day, so this means checking in with my mood several times a day sometimes. I like to track my sleep and see how that's impacting my mood. I like to track substance use and see if that affects my mood. I also like to track my triggers and see if, oh, I was really triggered. Okay, and it helps me piece things together when without writing it down and tracking it, I'm not always gonna make that connection. And the third thing I usually do in order to cope with these things is processing. And I know that's super vague, but I don't like to say journaling because a lot of people just aren't journalers, especially ADHDers out there. It just feels boring. So I just call it processing. You can do it in whatever way works for you. For some, that looks like journaling. For me, a lot of times it looks like pulling an oracle card and then journaling based on that. It gives me a starting point. For other people who are more verbal processors, that might look like pacing your house and muttering to yourself. That's totally fine and valid. Who says it has to be written down for it to count as self-care? And for those of you who are more visual, you could create artwork around these vague, unknowable alexithymic feelings, right? You can make artwork about what your alexithymia feels like. There are ways to cope. You are not doomed to be stuck in a dark room forever with emotions that are out to get you. You can learn to work with your emotions, even if you don't know what they are in the moment. My emotions no longer feel like the enemy, even though they did for a long time. Now they feel like my teammates. And if that sounds amazing, but totally out of reach and unrealistic for you, I would really love to help you. I am a life coach. I help auDHDers, neurocurious folks who know they're neurodivergent somehow, but don't really know what label is right for them yet. And I really specialize in emotional dysregulation because it's something I've gone through my entire life, and I would really love to help you. So go ahead and check out the link in the description to book a discovery call with me, and I will see you all next time.